Joe Biden finally called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this week. And it's a good thing, because the adversaries of America and Israel are on the move. Russia and Iran conducted a major joint naval drill in the Indian Ocean this week that you probably didn't hear about in the mainstream media, but that's why we do what we do right here every day, Monday through Friday at the Watchman Newscast. Now, according to Iran's press TV media outlet, this was a two-day drill codenamed Maritime Security Belt. The event covered an area of over 10,000 miles, and Press TV said, quote, it enlisted naval units from Iran's Navy and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard's Navy, together with their backup squadrons, as well as a Russian flotilla comprising the Stoiky corvette battleship, the Kola refueling ship, and a support helicopter gunship. There was also an Iranian destroyer involved as they fired at targets and prepared for battle. So, they were showing off their military hardware and firepower, and we also had Iranian and Russian commandos, quote, practicing anti-piracy operations during which they rescued two hijacked merchant vessels on the second day of their joint naval maneuvers in the Sea of Oman and the northern part of the Indian Ocean. The money quote from Press TV, however, was that the drills, they are a message of peace and friendship for the nations of the region. Oh, I'm sure they're all feeling the love as they see a nuclear powerhouse like Russia collaborating with the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, Iran. An interesting wrinkle here, by the way, a group of vessels from the Indian Navy joined this Russia-Iran drill on day 2. Not a huge surprise on one hand. India has historically had good relations with Russia and Iran, although there are some tensions. But India, which is the largest democracy in the world, remember, also has very good relations with Israel and the U.S., so we want India to be in the Western orbit, to say the least. Now, Russia and Iran also held one of these joint naval exercises a little over a year ago, and at that time, they were joined by China. Folks, I believe all three of these nations are prophetic players. More on that in a minute. We've seen Iran, of course, carry out a bunch of military drills over the past 2 months. We've told you about it here on the Watchman Newscast. Long-range missiles, Navy, Air Force, drones, ground forces. The Iranian regime is clearly gearing up for a fight as tensions continue to ratchet up with Israel and the U.S. But what about Russia? Look, folks, on the surface, Russia and Israel have decent relations, and Benjamin Netanyahu has met with Vladimir Putin on several occasions. A lot of their relationship, though, centers on Iran, namely Israel asking Russia to put a leash on its Iranian ally in Syria, and Israel giving Russia a heads up from time to time when it carries out airstrikes against Iranian assets in Syria. This is very important because Russian forces are on the ground in Syria. Remember, they arrived in September 2015, and folks, they are there to stay. Between Russia's presence at Israel's doorstep and its alliance with Iran, some believe that the war of Gog and Magog that's described in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38 and 39, could be on the horizon in the not-so-distant future. Best-selling author and editor-in-chief of All Israel News, Joel Rosenberg, joined us from Jerusalem this week to break it down. Take a look. Joel, we see Russia and Iran now conducting a joint naval drill in the Indian Ocean. Are there any prophetic implications here with this growing relationship between Vladimir Putin's Russia and the Iranian regime?
I am deeply concerned, Eric, about this growing alliance between Russia and Iran. We saw it beginning in the early to mid-1990s. It has certainly accelerated under Vladimir Putin when he came to power in 2000. It accelerated even further when then Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad came to power, and it just keeps intensifying. We have never seen a Russian-Iranian alliance, military, political, economic, diplomatic, in the history of the two countries. But we do have a prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, indicate that the country that we now know as Russia and the country that we now know as Iran, used to be known as Persia, these two countries will form an alliance in what the Bible calls the last days of history. After Israel has been reborn as a country, alliance with Iran and several other countries to come and attack and try to consume and devour the state of Israel. Now, the Ezekiel option, how might that play out? That was more than 15 years ago. And we just keep we keep watching the steady trajectory of this alliance forming. And I would say that while I'm happy that the United States, Israel, and the Sunni Arab countries are starting to form an alliance, I'm getting really worried about the Russian, Iranian, Turkish, North Korean, Chinese alliance that's building. That's something we've got to watch very closely.
Grown closer to Iran and Russia these past few years, and we've seen the leaders of these nations meet together several times, looking very cozy with each other. Again, Turkey, Russia, and Iran have all historically been at loggerheads with each other, but now, at this particular time in history, they are coming together. Could they lead that last day's invasion force that the book of Ezekiel talks about?